It is July 6th, PFF Forecast. We have got a fun one today. We're going to recap all of the win totals and season-long stuff that we really liked, bets that we liked over the course of the how many division previews we did. That'll be a lot of fun. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our plan for the rest of the hopefully short off-season. Eric, by the way, the intro song, I like it a lot. The intro song makes me feel like, Entourage is about to happen. We got one single request that missed the old music. So we're going to play it at the end. I feel like that's fair.
Our reviews have gotten, so we got an iTunes review from Tickle Whisperer.
Ooh.
That said, this is a great podcast, fact-based analysis on what really matters in the context of the NFL, now featuring non-depressing music in all caps. I dispute that. I like the lulls, and I think that having them at the end will still be a good value add. But that was an interesting one.
Helps set the tone. I only want to know one thing about your July 4th, because I assume it was nondescript and included a lot of distancing. What was the best thing you ate?
Fried chicken. I don't know. Like, we didn't have really. I mean, we just
you didn't go all out, huh?
We didn't go all out. Like you said, it makes me a pariah sometimes, but I was distancing from everybody. Ultimately I was not, the food was fine. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like we had ribs or something like that.
Okay. Well,
what about you?
Perfect segue. Ordered a meal. Pretty excited for it.
No.
The number one thing I was looking forward to was the ribs. And it's one of these things where you pick it up. It's all in a bag. You walk in one at a time, you pick it up, it's a whole thing, right? And get home, unpacking it. Number of ribs per person.
Oh, no.
2.
2?
2. Just enough to make sure that when they said ribs, plural, they weren't lying. Needless to say, before I even ate a single bite, there was an email fired out to the restaurant demanding an apology. I was livid.
Maybe they're just preparing you for America's inevitable decline.
So
are we going to have to be satisfied with 2 ribs from now on? Is that like the new normal hashtag?
I told them, I said, look, I love beans as much as the next person, but if my ratio of beans to ribs is 4-1, that's a problem. So they claimed that the ribs were part of like the appetizer course and whatever. So that's how they got around it. But that's my July 4th tale of woe. So I just sat at home and I made up for it with ice cream and tequila. That was what I did. So anyways, we're going to kind of go back and forth. We have written down, and maybe there'll be a few that we forgot. We'll try to keep it to like 5, 6, 7-ish per person, depending on how much time we have. We're trying to go shorter here so that, there's no commutes anymore. So, and we'll just kind of alternate back and forth. I'm sure you'll have some that I have, and if that's the case, we don't need to mention them twice. We can just talk about them a little bit. So most of these lines are from Bet Online. The props are going to be from Caesars. Let's just kick off. What is your first one on your list?
Well, this one actually, I went shopping a little bit.
Oh, God.
Yeah. You hate to see it. But I think I showed you this one the other day. We talked about Washington. The Washingtons, I think, is probably the best we can do right now. So they were over 5.5 wins at plus 100 on BetOnline. They're over 5 wins, minus 120 on FanDuel Sportsbook, our friends from the draft. Either one of those is probably fine with me. That's one I like the most.
Yep, I have both. When you sent me 5 at minus 120, I was like, oh man, if they fucking change it and I can't get it because you got it, I'll be pissed. Luckily, they didn't, so I got 5 as well. The name thing is so interesting. I have got to think this helps the organization, like from a win perspective. And I think this is kind of out there, but riddle me this. Living in Washington, D.C., I can tell you, or quarantining in Washington, D.C., I can tell you that no one gives a shit about this team. Like, they just don't. And part of the reason I have to believe is that their name is fucking awful. So if they got a new name that people could rally around, that you didn't feel bad about saying, that you didn't have to tiptoe around, like you might see people show up and actually be excited about these games. That just didn't happen last year. They have I think, underrated quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, played really well down the stretch. One of the best receivers in Terry McLaurin. We talked about him. Second highest graded rookie in PFF history, I believe, like 86.5. And then they drafted the best defensive player in the draft. Like 5 wins feels easy.
Yeah, and I'm actually writing this up for the website for tomorrow. Here are my only concerns about this. And you said one of these the other day. Who's Washington throwing to besides McLaurin?
Right.
So you're looking at Steve Sims, Kevin Harmon, but then they have Antonio Gandy Golden. I'm sorry.
There you go. That's all you need to know.
Cody Latimer, who's a player who's played in the league before. That's a tricky one. Here's another one as far as like a reason not to bet. Haskins was the 10th highest graded quarterback and the highest graded quarterback in the NFC East after week 11 to 17 last year. The only issue I have is that he had the highest rate of catchable inaccurate passes, meaning, he was a little bit helped out by the receivers. I don't know. He still had like the 6th highest ADOT in the league at the time. So it wasn't like he was a dink and dunk guy that was, sort of Sam Bradford bringing his way through our system. He was a legitimate NFL quarterback in the second half of the season. So I don't know.
Yes. That's super fair. And I'll add this. So our simulations had them going over 5 wins 91% of the time. Decent. But there's also this. They haven't had leadership in that organization in forever. So say what you want about Ron Rivera as like an on-field coach, but he's going to bring that. I mean, you go from having like Dan Snyder being the kind of head of the organization and, regardless of how you feel about him, like it's very clear that there were some issues that people had with him. You don't want that. So Ron Rivera is a pretty universally liked guy. I've got to think that helps them.
He also has not had like a really bad, so you look like he took over a Panthers team in 2011 that was 2-14 with Jimmy Clausen. Right. Now they had Cam Newton, but they've only ever bottomed out to 6-10 during his time with Carolina until last season. He was 5-7 before he got fired. That's a good step in the right direction. The organizational one's interesting because there were reports this week that basically 3 people who own a combined 40% of the Washington franchise have been trying to get out.
Yep, including Fred Smith, FedEx guy.
Yeah, so maybe there's some issues there. I don't know. The problem is Washington had been so poorly run for so long that I agree with your sentiment that any change is probably good. So again, I would say 5 is probably a good one. I would take the 5 with the extra juice rather than the 5.5, just because, I look at their schedule. One thing that I did notice that was pretty interesting is they get to face the Giants post-bye, and the Giants aren't post-bye. So even if you're things about, again, that win total comparison we had at the end, they have a somewhat favorable schedule. 6 out of their first 10 games are at home. Their division's not as bad or not as good as people think. There's a lot there for the Washington team.
All right. Now, one of the first ones on my list, the Baltimore Ravens at 11.5. I have them under. That's -115 on Bet Online. Happens about 2/3 of the time in our simulations. And I just, to me, it's so hard to win 12 games in the NFL, first and foremost. And it's also just so hard to play from ahead over and over and over again, which is something that they continuously did. And we talked about, Lamar Jackson had this incredible statistical season. And one of the things that stuck out to me in looking at him was he was the highest graded quarterback under pressure last year. Now, do I think that Lamar Jackson, would I bet on him being above average again this year? Yeah, probably. If there's a guy that's going to handle pressure decently well, it'll probably be a guy that can escape from anyone. Yeah, that's the guy. But I don't expect him to be 1. And he could regress quite a bit and still be decent. It could be 12th, 13th, 14th. That wouldn't be a shock to anyone. To me, that is going to that is going to contribute to the Ravens probably just being in less advantageous situations. They're going to get everyone's best shot. They're a team with a lot of swagger. And here's the other thing. They drafted a running back high in the draft. So as much as I love hey, we go for it on every 4th and 1, 4th and 2, I'm going to push back on a little bit of the analytics love that they've been getting and go under 11.5. They can have a great season and go 11-5.
Yeah, right. And it depends upon how that division is. I mean, they went from a division with probably one of the worst quarterback play in the NFL to one where we might see some of the best. Mayfield, adding to him, Stefanski's going to improve him, I think. But then you go Dalton to Burrow in Cincinnati, and then you go Rudolph and Hodges to Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh. Let's say they go 4-2 against their division. Well, now they're already 40% of the way to the losses you need there. And they're facing a first place schedule, which includes Kansas City. Houston's is not an easy out, even though it looked that way a season ago. So, yeah, it's just hard to do that. And it's hard to avoid, like, if, heaven forbid Lamar Jackson gets injured or sick and you have to play RG3 for 2-3 games, like, there's just a lot there that I think makes that a pretty good bet.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loves Marquise Hollywood Brown. If we talk about Cam Newton's, foot injury, like, that's what he's been dealing with, and to expect him to all of a sudden come in and play, a full game, I think is a full season, I think is a little, aggressive. So I don't know. We saw in that playoff game what happens when the Baltimore Ravens are faced with a little bit of, unluckiness. And I think they just we're on the right side of luck for the majority of last season. Not that they're not a great team. Everyone thinks you hate their team if you go under. Not the case. I'm going to go under my favorite team at some point here. You next.
All right. And this is also, let me make sure what the number is at.
Would you?
Wow. Okay. So
real quick question. And this is something that just popped into my mind. We are normally smart. If you're following a mathematical model, you're probably going to take, I don't know what the ratio would be, but you're going to take more unders than overs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this year particularly a year where that would happen when I can't see how the pandemic favors, like, is there any reason for you to believe that good teams are going to be more averse to avoiding the coronavirus?
No, but at the same time, like, I do think, yeah, I mean, everything's just going to be more smushed towards the mean, don't you think?
That was my thought as well.
So you're going to take overs on teams like Washington, the one I'm going to talk about in a second here, and you're going to take unders or lay off completely teams like Kansas City and Baltimore, right? Mm-hmm. Teams like Philly, teams like, teams where, and we saw it even like they've hung Philly like 10, 11 wins last 2 years. And It's like, look at all the stuff that can go wrong. And Philly still achieved some of their goals. They win a division title. They win a playoff game a couple of years ago. They still go under the total. And so here's one that I like, because there's a lot of certainty built into this, and it's overs -110 on Bet Online. It's actually even money if you look at FanDuel Sportsbook. You probably even get better than this, but I like Houston over 7.5. Look, Deshaun Watson's a lot better than most of the quarterbacks in the NFL. He's when his back's against the wall, I think you often get the best out of him. And you're not asking them to win the division again. You're not asking them to have a winning season. You're asking them to go 500. And when I look at this team, they have the 22nd hardest schedule in the NFL. This isn't like a super hard situation for them. Yeah, they lose DeAndre Hopkins, but does that mean that their win total, so it was 8.5 last year? Did they lose a full win in going from Hopkins to Brandon Cooks?
No.
I don't think that. I mean, and then Watson gets another year of improvement. Bill O'Brien gets another year as GM. For what that's worth, I'm assuming that being a GM took away from his coaching ability to a certain degree. Probably gets better at coaching, and he was already decent at it. The defense was terrible a season ago. It can't get much worse than what it currently, what it is. and they're not going to lose Clowney at the last second the way that they did last year. So I in a division where you're counting on Indianapolis to acclimate Phillip Rivers, you're counting on Tennessee to run as well as they did a season, like run good in terms of like the luck and everything like that. And Jacksonville's an easy 2 wins. So like that's where I like that. I do know they have a first place schedule, but ultimately speaking, they do have a hard schedule for the AFC South, but they don't have a hard schedule in general.
Yeah, my one point here would be the one that I made about Deshaun Watson, I think back when we were talking about this, which is his bugaboo has been holding onto the ball way too long. And if you look at dropbacks of 3 seconds or less than 3 seconds, I think it is, only Mahomes and Drew Brees have a higher passer rating, and I think only 5 guys have a higher PFF grade. So if he all of a sudden realizes he's got to kind of get rid of the ball a little more quickly, I think that's something that we saw him start doing a little bit last season. His time to throw dropped by over 1/10 of a second. So that trend continues. I think that could mean great things for them. I like that considerably. I also like them to win the division. Brings me to my next one, which is okay, which one do I want to go with here? Let me go with this one. So I'm going to stick in the AFC South, and it's the Titans to win the division at plus 185. This is easily one of my favorites. We have them as a fairly definitive favorite to win the division. And I guess the real question, so if you're saying, look, the Colts are the favorite and the Titans are the second favorite here, you have a really high opinion of really old Phillip Rivers in a new situation and a not so good opinion of Ryan Tannehill after having a great season he had last year.
Yeah.
So it depends on your confidence level in Tannehill. I just believe the Titans, everyone talks about how the Colts are a super well-rounded team. I think the Titans are as well. Like I think they're pretty solid in a lot of different places. And I really like AJ Brown.
Who's the favorite in this division if you switch the quarterbacks? Between like, let's say you gave Indianapolis,
between the Titans and the Colts, yeah.
You gave Indianapolis Tannehill, and you gave the Tennessee Titans Rivers.
I would say they're a little closer. I think the public has a hard time. I think people just have a hard time seeing the Tennessee Titans as a favorite. Mm-hmm. I just believe that to be the case. What do you think it is? If they switch,
I think the Colts are a definitive favorite if that's the case. And so when I look, well, I don't think it's as definitive as. Let me take that back. I don't know if I'm trying to make the point, but making the point that I try to make. But I look at the Colts. Sorry, I think it's closer, like you said. But I look at the Colts and I think, okay, here are your 3 wide receivers. You have T.Y. Hilton on year 9. Yep. You have Pittman as a rookie. You have Campbell as a second-year player. Your tight ends are Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. Trey Burton, a flop in the Chicago when he got a chance to be anything more than a third tight end. Running backs are fine, but again, they have an easy schedule. That helps them. That helps enhance what their running backs are worth, I think, a little bit. But you look on the defensive side of the ball. And your 2 starting cornerbacks right now are TJ Carey and Xavier Rhodes. Like,
yep.
If you put Rivers on the Titans, like you look at that team instead, and now you have Corey Davis is a former top pick. Adam Humphries is a coveted free agent. Like that season ago, their tight ends are probably just as good in Jonnu Smith and Anthony Perkser, and then you got a better backfield, frankly. And then on the defensive side of the ball, like, everybody thinks the Colts are fine because they have Justin Houston and DeForest Buckner. But I kind of look at that and say, okay, well, I'm seeing, I'm seeing Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, like younger guys, right? And then I look at the secondary, Adoree Jackson, Malcolm Butler, Christian Fulton, Jonathan Joseph. Like, they've like really taken the PFF, like, hey, let's make sure that our worst 5 player or 5 the 5th best player on the secondary is actually okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know, man. Like, And then so if Tannehill regresses a little bit and Rivers elevates himself a little bit, like I still don't see it being all that heavy of a move.
Yeah. I really believe that there is a strong belief that Derrick Henry and his amazing rushing helped Ryan Tannehill become a better passer. Like I think that's the narrative out there, and I don't see any reason why just watching like regular programming people wouldn't believe that. So to me, that definitely devalues what Ryan Tannehill did. He was in the regular season the highest graded quarterback from a clean pocket. It's not a fluke. He wasn't like he was good under pressure. He had over 90 passer rating, but in stable situations, he was also very good. And I don't think that can be underestimated. Okay, your next one.
Okay. Man, this number has not gotten better. I think a lot of people are heavily into this now. I was going to say Detroit, but I think that ship has sailed. So here's what I'm going to go with just for the like where you can shop around, because at FanDuel, you look at Buffalo's win total and it's 8.5. Make sure this.
I see it at 9 on BetOnline.
Yeah, and under, yeah, so it's 8.5 at FanDuel. At BetOnline, it's 9 minus 115. I'm going to take that under 9.
Mm-hmm. I have
the same too. For the same reason. Like, and again, like we don't want to bag on Josh Allen. Like I do tend to agree with Silva that if you like Evan, if you say like, look, conditioned on them going 12-4, Josh Allen's probably an MVP candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but conditioned on what? Conditioned on a number of things, a number of other things are true. So like I just don't see that team, especially now with New England having acquired Cam Newton and being a tougher out, the Miami Dolphins being a tougher out. I think the Jets, everybody hates the Jets, but I think the Jets will beat the Bills once this year at least. Like I just, and then when you look at their schedule, the Bills have the ninth toughest schedule in the NFL this year, and toughest in that division, I believe. Like Josh Allen should not be getting 9 wins yet.
I agree. I had this one too. It just feels really. If you look at the Bills in isolation, I think you can see it. When I start to compare them to the other teams in this division, and you go, okay, Cam Newton. I'd rather Cam Newton than Josh Allen. I know people are going to like start writing about this, but data backs us up thoroughly. I'd rather have the Ryan Fitzpatrick Tua combo, and Sam Darnold's the closest. They both sucked. I'm not saying like that I would 1,000%. I would feel that confident in Sam Darnold over Josh Allen. Certainly not. But I'm not taking Josh Allen definitively over Sam Darnold. So how can you say, yeah, okay, 10 wins to the team with the worst quarterback or tied for the worst quarterback in the division? Like that just doesn't make sense to me. So
yeah. I mean, and you also look, and I really like the Bills and the way that they've gone about their business, but let's look for a second. They are depending upon Josh Norman to play right corner for them. And Josh Norman was a below replacement level player last season.
He's going to have a revival, though, in that system.
Levi Wallace is fine as a backup corner. EJ Gaines is fine as a backup corner. Teron Johnson was okay last season. But they are more fragile than I think people give them credit for. Poyer, Hyde, and White are as good of a trio in the secondary as it gets. But when you don't have the fourth guy, and that gets tricky, especially when teams can challenge you, and they just had an easy season in terms of being challenged last year.
Yeah, an interesting thing to watch here will be Stephon Diggs, fairly outspoken guy, right? Gets open downfield. And Josh Allen was like the least accurate quarterback throwing the ball downfield. So that'll be interesting to see. Our simulations have them going under 9 or fewer, I think, like 75% of the time. Yeah. So I like that one quite a bit. Okay, my next one. You were right on the Lions. It's 6.5. Over is minus 140. which I want to say is like you need to win 60% of the time is break even. I'm doing this in my head. Does that seems about right? Maybe right under. And we had 60. Them at over 6.5, about 70, a little under 70% of the time. So I still like that one, but I think for the Lions, I would rather go plus 600 to win the NFC North. Just a little sprinkle, just a little bit. Matt Stafford has just been completely forgotten. I also like Matt Stafford at 50 to 1 as an MVP candidate, but 6 to 1 odds to win the NFC North in what I believe truly is a 3-horse race. Like, I think it is Vikings, Packers, and Lions. I know the Lions were catastrophic last year. I know they drafted a running back in the second round. But it's not as if the Packers didn't too, and it's not as if the Vikings didn't get rid of their best offensive player last year. So, like both these teams have real uphill battles. The Packers won 13 games last year, but I did this for NFL Network a little bit over the weekend. Like, I looked at Aaron Rodgers' numbers. The dude had the lowest rate of positively graded plays in his career last year. Yeah. So I don't know. This is as much a fade on the Packers and the Vikings as it is that I think the Lions are an underrated team. Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones are the best wide receiver duo. Notice what I said there? The best wide receiver duo. And Matt Stafford in this new offense was tremendous. I want to say he was
notice how
second.
I've refrained from being a rube and say, hey, look, Kenny Golladay has already more 1,000-yard seasons than Devontae Adams. But Devontae Adams has 2 797 or 997-yard seasons. So,
good for you.
But I refrained. People act like, Golladay, people act like it was the most egregious thing they've ever heard in their life. And it's like, I don't know, man. The Packers offense, since they went to Adams as their lead receiver, has not been a good offense. So,
I think it's legitimately close. It is legitimately close. Kenny Golladay is awesome. I thought Aaron Nagler made a really good point, which is Devontae Adams is the only guy on the Green Bay Packers and still manages to win. I totally understand that. That's a great point. Kenny Golladay had 16 catches, 20-plus yards downfield with David frickin' Blau throwing him the ball for half the year. So Matt Stafford, number 2, I can't speak today, second highest PFF grade from a clean pocket when he was the starter last season. We give them about a 20% chance to win the division, implied odds like 13-something% at 6 to 1. All right, your next one.
Okay. Man, there's so many good ones.
I am guessing. I'm playing a game in my head where I'm guessing where you're going to go next, and I think I know where you're going to go next.
I think I'm going to hold on. Let me make sure that this is what it is. I'm going to stick with the NFC North.
Okay. Damn it.
And I'm not going to take the sucker bet. I look here on Bet Online. Under 9 wins for Minnesota is minus 125. I did print that as a pick long time ago when it was minus 110. So there's been some movement there. Happy about that. I'm going to go to FanDuel Sportsbook and take under 8.5 at plus 115. I think the Vikings are going to be bad this year. I think they got 6 and 10. I think they
so great.
I think they have 6 and 10 written all over them.
Yes, they do.
I understand that their corners sucked, and so they had to get rid of them, but they still have to replace them. I also think that they had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL a season ago, and if we look at our strength of schedule here, they have the 5th hardest schedule in the NFL this season, the hardest in that division. Kirk Cousins benefited a lot from being ahead. Kirk Cousins benefited a lot from early down success in play action, things that aren't necessarily stable, especially with respect to game script. And they don't get to play Brandon Allen, David Blau, Matt Moore. They lost to Matt Moore, by the way. Chase Daniel. They lost to Chase Daniel, by the way. Aaron Rodgers should be improved from last season, a team that they lost to twice, including as 5.5-point favorites at home with a chance to win the division. And, they have to play the NFC South, all 4 quarterbacks of which are better than Kirk Cousins. So I like them under, and if there wasn't such a thing as limits, or if there if there wasn't such a thing as limits, I might be on him a little bit more.
I don't. There's no way that I could top that. That was beautifully put. There are a couple of things that scare me about Kirk Cousins. One of them is Kevin Stefanski being gone, and where Kirk Cousins thrived last year was the same fucking play. Oh, God, I'm swearing too much today too. The same freaking play over and over again, which was play action, bootleg. He sits there, he waits. Stephon Diggs ties the cornerback and safety into a pretzel, and then Kirk Cousins delivers the throw downfield. No Stephon Diggs. To be seen whether Justin Jefferson can step in and be, I don't know, 60%, 70%, 80% of Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is really freaking good. Maybe the best route runner in the NFL. You take that bit away from Kirk Cousins, and I'm worried. I'm worried about this team going all in on running the ball on early downs, on Kirk Cousins having to try and drop straight back and win. So let me look here. Last year, play action rate was 31.4%. It was under 20% the year before. I would be very worried about that regressing a little bit. Adam Thielen, I think, is really good, but is he really good where you feel great about your wide receiving core as being Adam Thielen, rookie, and Olabisi Johnson? I don't think so.
And here's the other, we're missing the point, and I didn't even say the Vikings receivers, so I think I've already thrown that out there a number of times. We're not even – the bar isn't can they get a second receiver that's good. The bar is in the NFL currently is if they can get a third wide receiver that's good. Like last season they had Diggs and Thielen, and aside from a month, like that October month where, Cousins, the Vikings offense was amazing for like a good solid month there. Look, the map, so the Washington game on Thursday Night Football, 273 yards through the air. Kansas City, 212. That's not a good Kansas City defense. Dallas, 211. That's not a good Dallas defense. The Denver Broncos, where they got behind against Brandon Allen by 20, came back and they had 285. They did not eclipse 300 yards passing after week 7 against the Detroit Lions. The whole season, even in the playoff game against New Orleans, they were not a team that could drop back and throw efficiently. And like I look at, and again, when you look at the games that they played, Washington on Thursday Night Football, that was Haskins and Keenum. Okay, Matt Moore against Kansas City. Yes, in the Dak game, but the Dak game they kind of got lucky with turnovers and bad play calling.
They definitely did.
Denver was Brandon Allen. Seattle, they got beat in Seattle. Seattle roasted them because their defense sucks. Detroit, they got to face David Blau. Los Angeles, what they get? 7 turnovers because Phillip Rivers was a pumpkin at the end of the season. And then they lost at home to Green Bay, and then they played Sean Mannion, who apparently ends up in the non-Dalvin Cook on the field splits, by the way, when his agent sends that out. So let's just remember that when Sean Mannion started. So, like, this is it's going to be a different season. We talk about them needing 2 wide receivers to replicate last year. No, you face Aaron Rodgers week 1, Phillip Rivers week 2, Ryan Tannehill week 3, Deshaun Watson week 4, Russell Wilson week 5, Matt Ryan week 6, Aaron Rodgers week 7. Are any of these quarterbacks worse than Kirk Cousins? Matthew Stafford week 8. Then you get to Chicago, and by then Nick Foles is going to start. Remember what Nick Foles did to them in the NFC Championship game 3 years ago. Then Dak. Then Teddy, Teddy is going to have the game of his life against the Vikings in that stadium. And then finally they get to Gardner Minshew, So you look at that schedule, it's not about 2 wide receivers. It's about, hey, we're behind. Let's get 3 wide receivers on the field and try to come back. And that was a Vikings team that was fish out of water last year. And that's how it's going to be all 2020 season.
That was great. All right, my next one is a couple that I'm thinking about. I'm going to save Teddy for you. One that I really like that I think, and here's the reason I really like it. I look at it and I immediately go, oh, seems like a low number. Then I realize the under is plus money. Why is this a low number?
I know which one.
Oh, a quarterback that's absolute garbage in a stadium where they won't have a single person either in the stadium ever, which look, I know that the Chargers have not played with a single person in the stadium ever, but when there are people in the stands, they won't be Charger fans. It's 7.5 for the Los Angeles Chargers. The under is plus 115. The over is minus 145. People think, rightfully so, that this is an incredibly talented roster. They are. I would say if you exclude the quarterback, they are top 5 rosters in the NFL. The only place where you're a little worried is offensive line. But maybe the best defensive back group in the NFL, I think they probably are. They have 2 great pass rushers. They have 2 great receivers, pretty darn good tight end. But they have a quarterback that's probably going to be Justin Herbert, because I have a hard time seeing take a guy at 6 and then go, you know what, you're going to sit on the bench if he's healthy enough to play. In which case, if Justin Herbert is the starting quarterback, under 7.5, I will take.
Can I piggyback off this? So I just looked at their schedule. Let's just put this down right now. The Bengals plus 3 at home against the Chargers on week 1 is plus 100. That's the bet. That's the bet to make. because look again, they go to Cincinnati. They're going to have the worst quarterback in that game.
Yep.
Home to the Chiefs.
Well, I don't know.
Home to the Panthers.
They'd have the worst quarterback if the Chiefs played their backup.
Yeah. Home to the Panthers, which I think will be an interesting game. At Tampa Bay, right? And whatever we know about Tampa Bay, I think in week 4 they're going to be engaged, right? Yep. And then at Saints. So, we're talking about a start here that could be 1-4 or 0-5. I mean, look, Teddy could go into I almost said San Diego, Los Angeles, and win. But this start it's got kind of crap written all over it. And then you look at the finish here. You go at Bills, Patriots at home, Falcons at home, at Las Vegas Raiders, Broncos at home, and then Chiefs on the road to finish the season. This is not an easy schedule. We actually have them. You look at schedule; they're top 10 in terms of difficulty. I love this pick. Great job.
Thank you. I knew you'd like it. I knew you'd get on board with me there.
Yeah, and I can't do 2 terrible teams over here, so I'm not doing the Panthers. And again, I'm not letting my I let my Vikings skepticism creep in.
Yep.
To
You're not letting it kill you twice.
I leaned into it.
Panthers 5.5 minus 120 though. I don't hate it, but you're going somewhere else.
I'm going out west. Okay.
Okay. I know. I kind of think I know where you're going.
Yeah. I'm not gonna ram this down anybody's throat. But I'm gonna go with the formerly St. Louis, currently Los Angeles Rams.
Terrible.
I'm gonna go.
How many people just said "fuck this podcast" after hearing that?
I'm gonna go under 8.5. Let me make sure that the price is the best here, but it's minus 105 on BetOnline.
Yep.
It is minus 130 on FanDuel, so you're actually getting a good deal. If you go to BetOnline at minus 105. No, I'm sorry, it's minus 125. They flip them sometimes. You're still getting a better deal on BetOnline. Under 8.5, I'm going to go with the Rams here.
The interesting thing about the Rams is I want to feel as though last year, the couple years before, it was wow, they just had everything working for them. And last year, everything kind of went to shit. Their offensive line got injured. They had injuries everywhere else. But then I look at it again and I think, you know what? They kind of reaped what they sowed. They did not build depth. They invested in Todd Gurley. They went back to the well and invested in Cam Akers as their first pick in this draft. And they have not adjusted. They do not run quick game. I do not understand how they don't implement more quick schemes here. I mean, last season, Jared Goff's passer rating was above average when he threw in 2.5 seconds or less, and it was below average when he threw after.
Yeah.
But he was once again in the league lead in terms of attempts thrown in 2.6 seconds or more. So, the interesting thing about the Rams last year were that they didn't really change what they ran, but Jared Goff's time to throw decreased. And it was largely a function of, well, he had to get rid of the ball. He didn't take a lot of sacks. So I am nervous about this team adjusting, especially with the pandemic, right? Like if you were ever to say, here's an off season where teams aren't going to have a whole new offense to run out there, a bunch of new schemes, like this would be it. So I love Sean McVay and the Rams, but I think this is a smart bet as well.
What got better? What got better for the Rams this offseason?
Exactly. The only thing that got better is that they don't have all these injuries again, right? Which is like in the NFL, that's just going to happen. So
I think one of the sneakiest offseason moves this year was Jim Fossil's son, John Fossil, and Greg Zuerlein both going to Dallas.
Yep, I agree. I like that a lot. Okay, let's do some quick hitters here to get out of here on this. Here are my remaining win totals that I like. We talked about the Panthers. I have the Jaguars over 4.5 at -120. I'm a Gardner Minshew believer. I'm worried that they are trying to tank, but I also 4.5 is not a lot. Anyways, I also have the San Francisco 49ers at under 10.5. And I say this as a San Francisco 49ers fan, but 11 wins is a lot. And they are going to regress a little bit. And on offense, it's going to be a hard road for them. You know, Deebo Samuel's now hurt. He's going to have a screw in his foot. I'm a little concerned about the 49ers offense. I think a little defensive regression is coming. And those are my remaining win totals. Do you have any others?
Let me.
By the way, are you with me on the Niners?
Yeah, I took them. The only tricky thing about the Niners is you look at their schedule, and again, like all this could go up in smoke, right?
Yep.
But let's say like injuries do befell them. These are their first bunch of games: home Cardinals, road Jets, roads Giants, and they're probably going to stay over in the East Coast for the Jets Giants. Home Eagles, home Dolphins, home Rams. Like that's 6. That could be 6-0. Like that's where I'm looking at that. And I'm like, okay, but if you're sitting on an under ticket for San Francisco and they lose like 2 of these games, I think you're pretty set because at Pats, at Seahawks, Packers at home, at Saints is the next 4 games.
Yeah,
and then at Rams, Bills, the Cowboys and Seahawks in the month of December. It's a lot like last season where the early part of the year was really easy and projected the second half of the season is going to be a lot harder. But you're right. I mean,
here's what I would say. If you think that the Niners are winning 11-plus games, bet Jimmy G for MVP.
Yeah, well, and they have to win. They probably have to go 5-1 or better in those first 6. Like that's a hard thing to do for any NFL team. As we said, when our null hypothesis is that things are going to smush towards the middle, that includes teams like San Francisco smushing towards the middle. If we're looking at a schedule and we see 6-0, 4-2 might be like more likely outcome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Smush me towards the middle on some of your other ones.
I'm kind of towards a fading of the Colts. I do like Frank Reich. I do like a lot of the things that the Colts do and the way they operate. But you're getting under 9 wins at +105, which I just think is a value play. There, I like I like the Las Vegas Raiders at under 7.5. Back when I printed it, it was -110. It's -125 now. I'd still take it. I think when you look at a team with poor home field advantage, last season they were kind of a fluke to even get to the 7 wins they got to. With they didn't win any games by more than a score. That one's pretty good. We talked about the Patriots last week. Under 9 is still +100 if you can get that 9.5 at a reasonable price. Those are all ones, under 9.5 on FanDuel Sportsbook for what it's worth is -135. So it's probably, I'd still shade towards the 9 there at even money. But that's kind of where I'm at.
I have some props I'm going to run through.
Okay.
I want a thumbs up or a thumbs down here. So I've comeback player of the year. I like Matt Stafford at +650. And as a long shot, I like Derwin James at +2,500.
Ooh.
Yes. Now, that means that Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Newton, and Matt Stafford basically kind of have to have meh seasons. But I don't believe that a person not coming back from injury is winning. So that takes out a decent number of those guys. MVP, I like Jimmy G at 40-1 and Matt Stafford at 50-1. Your thoughts? Thumbs ups or thumbs downs on those?
Yeah, I like all those. I think you're fading Cam a little bit, right?
Yep.
I don't mind that.
Okay. Keeping it going, I like Coach of the Year, Matt Vrabel, 25-1.
Ooh.
Yes, people love they love Mike Vrabel.
Plus the expectations are low enough if they win the AFC South again.
Thank you.
Let's say they get maybe a 2 seed or something. He's a shoo-in.
All right, and then my props. You ready for these?
Okay.
Zeke Elliott under 1,332 yards, -110. Our projections have him at like 1,130. The one you wrote up for the website, which is great, which is Kenny Galladay's over. And those are the two props I settled on.
I like that. I'm writing about Terry McLaurin. I'm not even sure what side of that one I like yet.
Neither am I. I had the same thing. I think his is at like what 990, 989 or something.
I might just write basically like, hey, look, it's a pretty solid one. Derrick Henry. So I wrote about him a couple weeks ago. His prop was over 1,300 yards. It was like, it was above 1,300 yards. It's now at 1,279.5. The Darion, I'm kind of thinking of their backup running back, a draft pick out of Appalachian State. They're thinking about him. Also thinking about maybe they're not as going to be ahead as much. I think if this thing ever got down to like, let's say 1199.5, you might have to think about over. But I think that's a solid number for now. There are some, if you think about quarterbacks that might not make it through the year and you just want to shove money on their unders. For example, Teddy Bridgewater, his passing yardage prop is 3349.5. Assuming he is healthy for every game, he still might not start every game. That's a play where you think about under. Trying to think about the other, but that's one quarterback. Like that's kind of where I'm always looking is quarterbacks that might not finish the season, and then trying to think of another one. But yeah, that's basically it for me. Is the overs with Galladay, unders with running backs, and then Lamar Jackson's has moved so much that I kind of wouldn't even bet his rushing yardage prop at this point. Now that it's near about 900.
Alrighty, that was a good recap. Going forward, we're going to try and do a couple of things similar to what we did with that redraft, where we got groups of people together and we just kind of talked about things that are pertinent and interesting, whether it be with a betting angle, a fantasy football angle, or just like a football media angle. So we're working on that. One of the options is obviously with that crew that we had for the redraft, which was a lot of fun. But there's some other good names we have on there. We've put together some groups. We're going to try and get a few of those out of the way as we head towards the season. And that'll be fun. Real quick, before we go, I have one thing I want to read at the end. But how are you feeling about week 1 being played as scheduled?
I'm going to stick with my base rate, which I think is about 70%. I think yes. I think it's still a yes. I think
percentage we play at least 50% of the season.
2/3. I mean, don't you think the biggest risk is them not starting until November?
Yes. I do think if we delay or we have to cancel games, that really worries me because I'm not sure it's getting that much better.
Well, and that's how I sort of see it. I don't see a big difference between if they go ahead and start the season, that means that they've gone through training camp, they've done everything, and then at this point it's like, well, they're already pot committed, right? So
the outrage will be done soon.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we don't want to make outward moral judgments here. I think our stance has always been that we want to make sure that everybody's safe, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the risks are properly, valued. There are risks and reward to everything. So I'm really hopeful that the NFL is going to take all the precautions necessary to make sure that everybody's safe and we can still have a season.
I agree. I second that. All right, I'm going to get us out of here on this. You sent me this snippet on Quibi. We don't have a Quibi segment today because it's on Thursdays. But I wanted to read this to you guys. This is how we'll close it out. People have wondered why Katzenberg and Whitman, those are the two founders, CEOs, in their late and early 60s, respectively, and are not very active on social media, and why they would believe they have unique penetrating insight into the unacknowledged desires of young people. When I ask Whitman what TV shows she watches, she responds, "I'm not sure I'd classify myself as an entertainment enthusiast, but any particular show she likes? Grant," she offered, on the History Channel. It's about President Grant. Okay. Katzenberg is on the phone all the time, but he is also among the moguls of his generation who have their emails printed out and vertically folded for some reason by an assistant. In enthusing about what a show could mean for Quibi, Katzenberg would repeatedly invoke the same handful of musty touchstones: America's Funniest Home Videos, Siskel and Ebert, which I don't even know, and Jane Fonda's exercise tapes, which I do know. When Gal Gadot came to the office and delivered an impassioned speech about wanting to elevate the voices of girls and women, Katzenberg wondered aloud whether she might become the new Jane Fonda and do a workout series for Quibi. That part killed me. Apparently, her face fell, says a person briefing on the meeting. Where was this from, by the way?
I just found a tweet somewhere. Everybody was dragging it. Dude.
I mean, incredible. It's incredible.
Speaking of, I just got to break a little news, and thank you to whomever in the chat here, Eric Youngdahl. Tim Grunhard, former center for the Kansas City Chiefs, played with Joe Montana in the 90s, just tweeted, and he's on Soren's show, as we are. Patrick Mahomes fans rejoice. Good news is on the horizon. # Chief forever. There might be some news here on the quarterback front moving forward, today.
Chief forever.
Chief forever. Sounds like me.
Wow. So what do you think? Like 10 years, 400 million?
Can you imagine? Well, here's the question. So to close on this, to answer your question, I think about coronavirus too. More draft picks signing their contracts recently. Mm-hmm. Should we take anything in that account? If Mahomes signed this deal, it's either acknowledgement that they know that the cap is going to shrink, or hey, let's put some good news out there. Yeah. We'll see.
All right, that's our show. We'll be back Thursday morning. Thanks, guys. Peace out.